So, ladies and gentlemen, today on Sports File, we're going to enter some very controversial territory, and I tell you why. In all the years I have been following and covering the Toronto Maple Leafs, unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to cover the way that Dave Keon was disrespected by former owner Harold Ballard and all the drama surrounding that. I basically think, in my personal opinion, that not only are the Maple Leafs cursed for the way they treated Davey Keon, who they later claimed to be the greatest player in the team's history, which is arguable. There's been a lot of great Maple Leaf players, including Keon. He is definitely top three. But I basically think unless they get a voodoo priest or a fakir to basically lift the curse left by the way Dave Keon was traded and treated, not traded, but treated in the mid 1970s, they'll never win a Stanley Cup ever again. Now, for those who have never heard of Dave Keon, it's kind of regrettable because he's considered the preeminent offensive defensive player in NHL history. Great on the shorthand, great on defense. Held back stars like Jean Beliveau and Bobby Hull, and a lot of great players throughout the years with his what he called the combination of a grinder style and interpretive, forward style. Now, Dave Keon was born March 22nd, 1940, in the great community of Noranda, Quebec, which I have a connection with because I have some family of that work in that community in the mining industry. Now, we played professionally for 22 years, including 15 years with the Leafs and several years with the WHA and with the Hartford Whalers when they joined the NHL in 1979. He was inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1986, inducted at the Ontario Sports Hall of Fame in 2010, and on October 16, 2016, was named part of Toronto Maple Leafs Centennial team, and where he was named the greatest player of all time for the Leafs. Now, in 2017, like a lot of people I've covered in my podcast and in Hill History presentations, he was named one of the 100 greatest NHL players of all time. Now, the center, he stood 5'9", 175 pounds, give or take. He started his junior hockey actually for the St. Michael's Buzzers of the OHA Metro Junior B team in 1956-57 season, and ironically, he was a heavy goal scorer at the time. His defense was still in development. He once scored 7 goals in one game. Now, in February '57, he was named to the league's Eastern All-Star team and was picked by NHL scouts as its top prospect. He won Rookie of the Year honors that year, and the squad also won the league championships. He also played with the big club, as we call the St. Michael's Junior A team, and moved to that club full-time in the '57-'58 season. He stayed with St. Michael's until the 1960 season, when he turned professional and he joined the Sudbury Wolves of the Eastern Professional Hockey League for 4 playoff games. Now, these were his only minor playoff games, but by the next season, he was with the big club. He joined the Leafs in the '61 season, winning the Calder that year as the league's top rookie with 20 goals and 45 points. And this was the first of his 6 consecutive 20-goal seasons. In his second year in the NHL, he was named to the second All-Star team and won the Lady Byng trophy as the most gentlemanly player, taking only 1 minor penalty throughout the entire season. He won the Lady Byng again in '63, and he only took a single minor penalty. Now, here's where the glory years of Keon came in. From 1962 season to '64, the Leafs won 3 consecutive cups, outlasting the other original 6 teams. When I spoke to Jean Beliveau in 1980 in Campbellton, and Keon came up in conversation, he noted, like he's noted to members of the media and fans numerous times, that Keon was not just about goal scoring. Keon could hamper your ability to score, hamper your ability to set up a play. He wasn't a dirty player. If anything, Beliveau said he's a player that laughably would follow you to the bench if the coach in that game said, follow your top player. But Beliveau believes that Keon was not with the Leafs in '62, '63, and '64. And '67, the Leafs would have not won that cups. He was the straw that stirred the drink. Now, he was the Leafs' leading scorer in the 64, 67, and 1970 seasons, and the team's top goal scorer in 70, 71, 70, 70, 72, 73. Now, a very fast skater, and like I said, his defensive style changed the way some teams recruited players like that. He could play defense, but he could also score. He would play again against the opposing team's top center, and the all they call that. I think the term neutral zone trap started with Dave Keon. In 70-71, he scored, get this, 8 shorthanded goals, setting an NHL record. It was only broken by Marcel Dion in 74-75, and later by Gretzky in 83-84. A sign of a great player, he's good on the forward, the power play, their shorthand. Now, the 4 Stanley Cups with the Leafs were just tremendous. And I talked about Beliveau saying being shut down in '67. That's when Keon shutting down Beliveau became very important, because in the last 2 games of the season, Beliveau was stopped from being the scorer he was, and you also went to Conn Smythe that year as MVP of the playoffs. Now, he only had 8 points in the playoffs that year, but it wasn't just because of his points total. As you recognize, again, it was he had a style where he would see certain portions of the ice, make them his, and anybody came in that portion, he would knock them off the puck, try to be progressive on the play, take the puck, delay the puck, whatever. And if there was technology in mid-60s to show Keon just one camera on him, he was doing multiple things at once. He was a thinking man's player. Now, because of this success, on Halloween, October 31st, 1969, he was named Leafs captain. He succeeded George Armstrong, who claimed he was retiring from hockey. Armstrong did return, but Keon remained captain, despite the fact Armstrong stayed for another 2 years, and he would wear the C throughout the rest of his career with the Leafs. The only controversy probably had Keon was being considered for Team Canada in 1972 Summit Series, but because he came off a mediocre year for him in the 71-72 seasons, it came a final pick between him and Bobby Clarke, which was very similar players. Him and Keon and Clarke had a lot of comparisons, and it was believed that Clarke had, in the minds of Harry Sinden and the other Team Canada officials, more of offensive style than Keon would have, thus getting more points than the Russians. I basically think that Keon and Clarke at the time were a very equal choice. I would have hoped he would have maybe dumped Parise and Goldsworthy or somebody else to put Keon on it, but you had Ron Ellis too, and Ron Ellis was kind of the poor man's Davey Keon from a defensive standpoint. Now, despite the fact he was not selected for Team Canada, the Ottawa Nationals, a new team to the WHA, made a strong effort to sign Keon, who they had placed on a negotiation list. Now, Harold Ballard, that crackpot, who became the Leafs majority owner in March of '72, said that Keon, get this, did not provide the leadership the team needed during the previous season and refused to give Keon a big salary increase to keep him with Toronto. Now, Keon did sign a letter of intent with the Nationals and received a $50,000 bonus check from the team, but the deal fell apart just before training camp. Now, Keon did sign the 3-year deal with the Leafs that year and rebounded in the 72-73 season, scoring 37 goals. And on November 22nd, 1972, he passed Frank Mahovlich by scoring his 297 goal as a Leaf, making him number 1 in the Buds' goal-scoring list. But you can see the overtures here that Harold Ballard didn't really like Keon and like the fact that he was popular with the players and the fans and everybody else. And you can see the WHO lure Keon was using as a motivator to get what he needed. By the time the 74-75 season came about, Ballard was ripping Keon to press on a regular basis, saying that the Leafs were not getting good leadership from Keon, blah blah blah, and he would never not trade Keon if the price was right. Now, when Keon's contract expired at the end of the season, Ballard said, he's not coming back. Now, which he did. Ballard felt there was a lot of young prospects coming up in center who needed more ice time, and Keon was asking for a no-trade contract as part of his new deal. And because Keon was 35, he was told he could make his own deal with another NHL team, but it would need compensation back to the Leafs. Now, Ballard had set the compensation price so high, rumor has it was 2 number 1 draft picks, and other teams shied away from signing him, even though, of course, the Leafs had no intent to keep him. Now, in 2019, you couldn't get away by this time of blockage, but the NHL was different back there. The NHL-PA agreement wasn't really as strong as it turned out to be later on. But the 2 number 1s would have been probably too heavy of a compensation for Keon, like a number 1 and number 2. But Dave Keon, again, he worked in Toronto, but like other NHL teams had stated publicly, that he really couldn't fit in because Toronto had a specific trouble with the third and fourth line and needed a good defensive player like Keon to compensate for the poor defensive and offensive play of those, what they call the bottom 6. Toronto never had 4 lines in the 70s that were comparable to Montreal, Boston, and the Flyers. And when Keon left in August 1975, as the Leafs still controlled his NHL rights, Keon jumped to the WHA, signing with the Minnesota Fighting Saints for a $300,000 contract over 2 seasons. Now, Harry Neal was the Saints head coach and an old friend of Keon. Now, Keon played well with the Saints, but the Saints at the time were really bleeding money, and with 21 games left in the season, actually they folded. Now, Keon was expected to return to the NHL, as he was not included in the dispersal sale of the Saints players to the other WHA teams. The New York Islanders took an interest in Keon, but needed to negotiate a deal with the rights with the Leafs. Again, the Leafs asking price, and still I heard it was 2 number 1s, was considered too high, and Keon was not say forced, but had to take compensation to sign with the Indianapolis Racers in March '76. Now, when the Fighting Saints were revived for the start of the 76-77 season, he was traded back to Minnesota, but the team folded again halfway through the season. And Keon was actually briefly the property of Edmonton Oilers, who then traded him to New England Whalers in January '77. Now, he would remain with the Whalers throughout the rest of his career, including 2 years in the WHA. And actually, when Gordie Howe joined the Whalers, it was kind of a dream match made in heaven. And when the Whalers actually returned to the NHL in 1979 in the merge, him and Howe stayed together, and Bobby Hull was on the team later on that year. And the Maple Leafs did have rights to take Keon back, but they declined, and he did remain in Hartford. And actually, in a dream line, Bobby Hull, Howe, and Keon would play on the same line, actually. Now, it was quite amazing. Now, Howe and Hull retired at the end of the season, now leaving Dave Keon as the oldest player in the NHL. He played 2 more seasons with the Whalers and eventually announced a retirement in June 30th, 1982 at age 42. But he was a very, very, what do you call, he could have played a few more years, but his goal totals were down, and Hartford was getting a lot of young prospects coming in, Ron Francis and a few others. But he didn't stay as a coach, and actually he moved to Florida after he retired and worked in real estate for a while. But he still had no connection with the Leafs for years and years, and for many decades refused to have any relationship with the Leafs, including after when Ballard died and the club changed ownership several times. But it was proven out that Dave Keon never trusted Harold Ballard, never really wanted to have anything to do with the Leafs ever again, and even when the Maple Leaf Gardens were closed in '99, Keon refused. Now, in January 2007, in a ceremony celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Stanley Cup winning team of '67, he was one of several members of the squad to appear on the ice at the game, which was actually the 80th anniversary as well of the first game played at the Toronto franchise. It was part of a revival of Keon. He did show up several times at the rink in celebration of anniversaries, including the 50th anniversary in 2013 of the 63 Stanley Cup winners, and again 2014 from the 64 Stanley Cup winners. Now, as it went later on in the late 2000, mid 2010s, he approved a statue himself on Legends Row in front of the Air Canada Centre, and again we talked about voted in 2016 as the greatest leaf of all time. And one day later, after the vote came out, he retired his famous jersey number 14 and was raised to the rafters. But I still think the way that Harold Ballard treated everybody in the Leafs, Keon especially, but you can imagine this, if Keon would have stayed with the Leafs when Sittler and McDonald and Glenn Anderson and Earl Thompson, Turnbull, Carlisle, I mean, Ballard was paranoid of WHA. He was paranoid of Dave Keon's personality. Dave Keon was a tremendous, role model to everybody, and as it were, we used to kind of joke he was a poor man John Beliveau, because nobody really criticized Dave Keon for his play. Just the fact he told Harold Ballard to go frig himself, and when the boss is a moron. See, Donald Trump has nothing on Harold Ballard. People criticize Donald Trump, and I said, listen, I saw Donald Trump years ago with Harold Ballard. Same personality, asshole personality, not really understanding what the public wants, only thinks about himself, only thinks about the dollar signs, doesn't really respect anybody. Donald Trump is nothing compared to Harold Ballard, because, Donald Trump might run the free world, but Harold Ballard killed a dream. He killed the Toronto Maple Leafs dream, or the dreams he used to have. Toronto Maple Leafs could have won cups in the 70s and 80s because Harold Ballard was there. He drove the team to the ground anyway. But neither here nor there. And if anybody doesn't like the fact I brought up Donald Trump, well, I'm sorry, I'm talking about Harold Ballard. How can you not talk about Donald Trump? You mentioned Harold Ballard. They're the two nails from the same devil, as we say. So anyway, neither here nor there. So going over Dave Keon's career, Calder Memorial Trophy in 61, Lady Byng 62-63. Second All-Star team, 62 and 71. NHL All-Star team selection, 62, 63, 64, 67, 68, 70, 71, 73. JP Bickle Cup, 62, 63. Paul Deneau Trophy, 77 and 78. Again, Hockey Hall of Fame. He's considered number 69 on the top 100 skaters of all time, and I think he should be higher than that. He has actually a rink named in his honor in Rouyn-Noranda. He also was a inaugural member of the WHA Hall of Fame. Again, statue on Legends Row in front of the Scotiabank. And to many, the greatest Toronto Maple Leaf player of all time. Now, his goal totals, he scored over almost combined 500 goals in regular season in the NHL and WHA, with 45 in playoffs. But the point totals were not everything. A consistent defensive player like he was not scared of any situation, and he was not scared of Harold Ballard. Now, in the case of Harold Ballard, I may do a bigger podcast on him down the road, but my disdain for the way he treated the Toronto fans and the Toronto players, I can only talk about him so much. I'm supposed to be an objective journalist. I cannot be with Harold Ballard. He's probably one of the most despicable Canadians in Canadian sports history. A disgrace from the time he took over the Leafs to the time he died. I have a relative in Toronto who tells me he goes to see Harold Ballard's grave just to prove to himself he's still dead. The man was despicable. And I think the curse of Dave Keon can be lifted. We saw them lose in 7 games of Boston this year, and I keep on thinking, if Harold Ballard wouldn't have treated Dave Keon so poorly, and then eventually treated Sittler and McDonald, everybody else so poorly, mind games has nothing to do with hockey. If you have a great player like Dave Keon, and George Steinbrenner tried to do a Harold Ballard years later, but he never done it with such evil. Steinbrenner was an egotist, while Harold Ballard was deliberately doing things to hurt other people just for the sake of it. Despicable. And Dave Keon was not despicable. Dave Keon was a great player. And if Jean Beliveau tells you that, as a stranger, it must be true. because Jean Beliveau was God. To many people, Jean Beliveau is the person that told the truth the most about his NHL. And he told me again that Keon stopped the Habs from winning 4 cups. So you have that on your mantle, Toronto. But you're going to have to find a way to get a smudge or a voodoo priestess or a fakir to lift the curse, because it's still around. I can feel it every time I see a Toronto hat. I can feel it. Anyway, Dave Keon, way to go, man! You stood by yourself for years, and I don't blame you. You did the right thing by not reaching out to Toronto, because he never really kind of appreciated you while you were there. It's the way it goes. Have a good day, ladies and gentlemen. Keep your stick in the ice. Bye.